and welcome to the World Soccer Talk podcast, your weekly dose of talking about watching soccer on TV, online, and apps. Coming up on episode 63, we discuss ESPN's coverage of the League Cup final, news about Fox Soccer Match Pass being dumped from the World Cup, UEFA announces new kickoff times for the Champions League, is a winter break coming to the Premier League, and new streaming providers are bringing soccer leagues to the United States. Plus, we have letters from you, the listeners, in our mailbag section. My name is Christopher Harris, a.k.a. The Gaffer. I'm joined today by Kartik Krishnaiyer. And how are things going for you, Kartik?
They're going well. Hectic week.
Yeah. It's back. I mean, so much going on, I'm sure, personally and in terms of work, but also in terms of football, which is why we're all here to listen to this pod. But lots of matches, and it's getting into that busy end of the season where, there's trophies on the line, every match matters, and relegation battles, and you name it. So let's start off, Kartik, by talking about what you've been watching, and let's start off on Friday's games.
Yeah, so the Mainz-Wolfsburg game was Peter Drury and Nigel Spackman. Fox, you just never know when this is going to happen, very randomly, generally on Friday night games. Take the BT feed every now and then. It was an entertaining game to a point, two teams fighting relegation. Hamburg and Cologne appear to have been cut adrift, but Cologne has been playing better of late, so maybe these two teams both stay up. But it was a good match in patches, and other times it wasn't so great. But again, if Fox, I think, has an inconsistency. Obviously, they have options on what they do in terms of their match broadcasts, whether they use their own talent in Los Angeles for voiceovers, whether they take the global feed, the world feed, or whether they take the BT sport feed coming from the UK. The international feed comes from the UK as well, actually. And in this case, they've taken the BT feed. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to what they do with this.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the BT Sport feed is that on that match I talked about in last week's podcast, which was the Frankfurt game against RB Leipzig on the Monday game, it was the BT Sports announcers, and with the match being delayed for 5 minutes and with tennis balls raining down on the pitch and all the things that were happening with the protests, the commentator said, okay, well, we're going to take a break and we'll be back in 5 minutes, which I'm sure caught Fox Sports off guard because they weren't breaking. And I think it was Christy Miles stepped in and said, okay, well, and he just talked for 5 minutes until the BT Sport announcers came back. Now, to me personally, the level of BT Sport commentators is great. Oftentimes you get Owen Hargreaves, you get Derek Ray at times, you've got Peter Drury, and you've got some really good...
Steve Bauer, who we're familiar with.
Exactly. So the level is good. So it's probably better, when they do that instead of having maybe the World feed. But actually, even with the World feed too, I think a lot of our hardcore Bundesliga listeners are missing the world feed announcers because there are some good ones on that one too. So I guess with Fox, it's probably just based on it's Mainz against Wolfsburg, so it's not the biggest game. So probably not a lot of people tuning into that. And who knows with Keith Costigan and his travel schedules, commentating for Seattle Sounders, and maybe he's meeting with Seattle. I'm not sure, but. Yeah, no rhyme or reason, but anyway, they were just interesting things to point out from that in terms of the commentating. The match itself was okay. It was, to me, kind of a very scrappy game. It was watchable, definitely, but very scrappy.
Yeah, so obviously the next day we had Leicester Stoke on NBCSN in the morning. Was I guess a good point for Stoke. Leicester probably should have taken all 3 points, but a situation where Stoke is just trying to claw and get results. Watched a little bit of the Liverpool match. They looked rampant, and then went to a college basketball game, went to the Miami Boston College game. So missed Everton, Watford, and another loss for Watford. I know there's a lot of hand-wringing among another loss for Everton. A lot of hand-wringing around Everton fans regarding Allardyce. Now, a lot of Everton fans, those who may not remember this, a lot of Everton fans used to complain about the style under David Moyes, even though they were finishing 5th, 6th, or 7th in the league every year. So they were already a little bit snobbish when it comes to that. and then to have on top of it the results be what they've been the last month and a half. I wonder if Sam's going to survive past this season.
I think definitely not. I think he's gone this summer. I mean, to me, it's one of those things that Everton really made a wrong decision at the wrong time. I mean, they were scrambling. They were thinking that they were going to get in a relegation battle. And they said, okay, who's the best person to get us out of this mess? And it was Sam Allardyce. And before he even managed his first game, Everton had won a game, and that pushed him up the table a little bit. So as soon as he started, they seemed to be okay in a relatively safe number of points. I mean, you never know. But still, I think they made the wrong decision to scramble, kind of a last minute getting him. And now this season, though, Big Sam seems to be even more negative than he normally is in terms of being very defensive minded, not playing an attacking game at all. And it's got to be a miserable season for Everton fans, knowing all the signings that they got over the summer, how things went south, and then bringing in Big Sam to keep them up. And of course, they're going to stay up this season, but it's not a very pleasant journny.
They remind me a lot of Man City under Mark Hughes. Money had just come in. There's a mishmash of signings, of overpaying for guys. I mean, they absolutely overpaid for Klaassen. They absolutely overpaid for maybe not for Sandro Ramirez, although paying anything for him at this point was overpaying for him. They certainly overpaid for Sigurdsson, and that I think has allowed Swansea to go out and get some guys and bring Ayew back to the club. Do some things that might keep Swansea in the league. They have that feel of a club that's adrift, that had a lot of money pumped in, had an aging squad, and just started making vanity purchases, right? Yeah. In addition to the money that they got from Lukaku. And then on the Watford side of this, Javi Gracia has gotten a couple of results and gotten Watford out of trouble for now. He's a resourceful manager. I watched him at Malaga. I thought he got a kind of a raw deal there. They weren't progressing, but they certainly weren't. They finished in the top half both seasons he was there. So maybe we'll have the first time since they've been promoted, and actually including the season they got promoted. They sacked their manager. Maybe for the first time in 4 or 5 years, Watford will hold a manager over the summer. Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, with them, you never know. On Saturday, I watched Leicester Stoke, similar to you, Kartik. I thought this was very, very reminiscent of the Mainz Wolfsburg game from the Friday. Very, very scrappy. Kind of for Stoke especially, kind of a relegation battle, and I still can't believe that Charlie Adams is still playing in the Premier League. Just a sad state there for Stoke fans. Brighton against Swansea. Brighton looks extremely well organised. Swansea set up with the wrong game plan and just got completely demolished in this game. Barcelona, Girona, watched this game, and an amazing strike by Coutinho, his first league goal for Barcelona. And he's been trying to get this goal for a few weeks now, kind of his typical long-range curler into the far post, and he's hitting the crossbar and I think the post a couple of times, and he finally got his goal. And then on to Sunday, Kartik.
Yeah, actually, Saturday's not done for me. I watched the Tigres Monarcas game on Univision Deportes. Tigres is so good to watch if you're tolerant of Liga MX football. And them and Monterrey. Now, this is the thing that's become very interesting. I think in this era, there's been more investment in the northern part of the country, in Monterrey specifically. And what you're seeing is those two clubs really kind of emerge as elite clubs in Mexico and challenge or surpass the clubs from Mexico City, Cruz Azul, Club America, and others, and then as well as Chivas, Guadalajara, and Atlas. Atlas has been terrible lately. So Monterrey is the center of Mexican football, North American football, CONCACAF right now in terms of quality. So Tigres, they won that match 2-1, as usual, enjoyable. I have now kind of adopted. I'm not supporting a club, but it's one of these things where I see Tigres is playing on a Saturday night. I think, you know what, I'm going to watch the match. It's going to be worth my time. And this certainly was second or third successive week I've watched them on the bounce and really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and Tigres will be playing Toronto FC, I believe, in the next round of the CONCACAF Champions League. So that'll be a watchable game.
Epic.
Sure.
That will be epic. Those might be the two of the three top teams in this region, Monterrey being obviously the other one. So Sunday morning, Palace Spurs. Boy, I think Roy Hodgson did such a good job when he took over Palace, but now it's getting stale, and they have a real issue in terms of injuries. Maybe they'll get Loftus-Cheek back this week. Maybe they'll get a couple of other guys back. Otherwise, they're getting gradually sucked into this relegation fight. Chelsea, Man United, it was interesting to see Peter Drury and the team for NBC really kind of dissect the way Mourinho set up his team in this match. They tried to put a formation together to give Pogba more time and space on the ball. We saw it happen once in the first half, and Conte took a yellow card on that. Other than that, that formation didn't work. But as the match went on, McTominay, playing in what would normally be the Pogba position, right, really kind of asserted himself on the match. And Chelsea had a certain degree of just quit in them, for lack of a better term. Although, again, the controversy about not having VAR came up because there was a goal by Morata that he looked onside for. But I think as you and I don't know if we're going to discuss it more in this show. I'm getting tired of it, right? We discuss it every week. But VAR is a no-go. Actually, since we mentioned college basketball a few minutes ago, I will mention there were 3 separate college basketball games this week where they went to the replays. Florida, Auburn, Virginia Tech, Duke, and there was a third game that I'm blanking out on now, which I was watching, where they went to the monitors inside a minute, took a lot of time, stifled the momentum in the game. In fact, the announcers in one of the games said, boy, this just kills the air in this match, this game. It's taking too long. Because you like to see bang, bang in basketball like soccer. The end of the North Carolina-Miami game, which I think everyone's seen now from the other night, where North Carolina hits the basket, Miami doesn't take a timeout, hits the basket, wins. They got the calls wrong after the replays. So it's just like, it's like this in every sport. And in soccer, we're seeing problem after problem. So that's the issue, I think.
Well, but for Chelsea, though, the Morata was onside, so that goal should have stayed. You mean it should have counted?
Oh, would VAR have sorted it? I mean, we don't know.
You would think so. But then again, you don't know. I mean, it's all down to the VAR, the team of people that are actually reviewing that video. You would think so, but to me, this match was not typical Man United, but definitely kind of more defensive. I wasn't expecting this one to be kind of a 3-3 game or 4-4 game. I kind of expected it to be a very close match. And the Chelsea Man United matches, especially with Mourinho involved, for either team, have always seemed to be really kind of very tense affairs. And I enjoyed watching it, but it wasn't the greatest one for sure. Now, Kartik, the greatest one, well, not really, but this one for Manchester City fans must have been a really comfortable victory in the League Cup final against Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, correct, but it was a difficult one in terms of the broadcast. First off, the first 15, 20 minutes of the broadcast, it looked like a web stream that they were trying to put on television. The technical quality wasn't there for me. Maybe other people didn't experience this, but I tried it on 2 different televisions, both HD TVs, both that looked like a webcast that had been blown up to full screen.
I think, there was a couple other people that mentioned this too on Twitter, on our Twitter account. And for me, I was watching it on a laptop, so I didn't notice it. But there were definitely some people that were watching it on HD television, so they were freaking out. But it looks like they must have screwed it up for that beginning of the broadcast.
Yeah, so they finally fixed that, but then we get constant promotion of Major League Soccer during the game. And I think at some point, had Craig Burley been left to his own devices, which I have to assume he wasn't, he would have said, this is just part of the paranoia and insecurity of American soccer fans, that we've got a 90-minute cup final coming from another country, and we're spending 45 minutes of it seemingly. Now, that's a figurative thing, right? Yeah. It was really probably all told about 5 minutes or 10 minutes talking about MLS. And at halftime, there was an MLS preview. This coincided with the unveiling of MLS's new hashtag, Our Soccer, which I've already commented plenty on Twitter on it. I think everybody knows my opinions on it.
Well, let's dive a little bit into that, Kartik. So to me, I felt sorry a little bit for Mark Donaldson and Craig Burley, because obviously they're given a script and they're told, okay, you got to read this thing out 5 or 6 times, 7 or 8 times, however many times it was during the broadcast. And you could tell, it was a script that they had to read. It was overkill. And that's the thing, even with Fox's broadcast of the Champions League, it turns into, Major League Soccer is the most heavily promoted league in the United States by far. You've got Univision, you've got Fox, you've got, not NBC, but ESPN.
Let me just jump in, Chris, and tell you, I've been watching a lot of college basketball the last week. They have promoted MLS during every single college basketball game I've watched. That Miami, North Carolina game I mentioned, that Duke, Virginia Tech game, that Florida, Auburn game, the Kentucky, Mississippi game last night, the Florida State, Clemson game last night. Every single game, there's an MLS is back thing on the scroll during their ticker, not when they're showing other news, and their MLS commercials running. So people have complained in the past to us that, they don't promote MLS the way they promote foreign soccer properties. That is complete bunk. Yeah. Oh, I'm so frustrated to hear that. But go ahead.
Well, the good news for Major League Soccer is that the season starts this weekend. So based on the games that are being played in prime time and on ESPN, on FS1, these must be going to have major TV ratings for these games based on how they've been promoted. Of course, I'm being sarcastic, but it is. During a League Cup final, I understand maybe a couple of times, maybe during the broadcast, just to remind people, hey, don't forget this weekend, ESPN has the MLS new season kicking off. But it was too much, way too much, and it interrupted the flow of the game. This one in particular was very one-sided, Kartik, in this game. So, if it was just imagine kind of a really end-to-end action game, kind of a 4-3 thriller, and Mark and Craig were having to figure out ways to slot those reads in for Major League Soccer. That would have been worse. It is what it is. I thought Mark Donaldson and Craig Burley did pretty well as commentating in this game. The challenge is really, for ESPN, I don't think they were planning on broadcasting this game at all. Originally, almost every single League Cup game this entire season has been on ESPN 3. We had, I think, one of the semifinals was on ESPN or ESPN 2. And up until about a week before this final, it wasn't going to be on television for ESPN. It was going to be on ESPN Deportes. So it was a last-minute decision. And so there was a lot of people complaining that there was no pre-game and kind of a really kind of robust halftime show or post-game. It was really last minute. So I would say hats off to ESPN for deciding to go ahead and put it on television and give us the opportunity to see it with an English language commentators. But I don't know. I guess the negative would have been just the over promotion of Major League Soccer. But and the Hour Soccer thing, the hashtag, I don't think it's even worth talking about, Kartik. I know for listeners who haven't had a chance to look at your Twitter feed, actually, I would encourage them, if they are interested or intrigued, go ahead and check Kartik's Twitter feed, because it goes into a lot of detail and kind of a lot of discussion about it. And it is very divisive, I think, in terms of a hashtag or an ad campaign. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah, I agree. So Monday we had the Dortmund match, and much like the previous week, we had a lot of protests, right, for the Monday night thing, and relatively speaking of the Wolfstadion, a place that is always filled, has arguably the best atmosphere in Western Europe, or in a Big Five European league of any club in a big league, or at least the big clubs, right? Stale, empty, protests. This Monday night thing, I don't think is going to work in Germany, unless. Now, I find it kind of interesting that for whatever reason, the Bundesliga gave Eintracht and Dortmund home matches, because those are, if you talk to any German fan, those are two of maybe the 4 or 5 most ruckus fan bases. Yeah. Right. So maybe they intended for this to happen. It's like they're self-sabotage. I don't know, because it just looked very bad. Yeah, and Alexi Lawless and Ian Joy were very good. Give them credit. Coming in, they knew what was at stake, what was important. In talking about this match, Lawless was more interested in talking about the fan protests than the match itself, which I think is correct. I think that was the right narrative. Credit to Fox. I think they didn't try and shy away from it as a rights holder. So
to be honest,
I give them credit.
To be honest, though, Kartik, I was a little bit disappointed with Dortmund fans. I mean, yes, there were a lot of empty seats, but comparing that to last week's Frankfurt game, and the banner along the touchline, almost the entire touchline, the delay of the game, the boos and whistles for minute 1 all the way through till minute 90, the tennis balls, the streamers, it was very, very a huge protest. And the Dortmund, I mean, they had the banners up, but the banners with the red and yellow, really blended into the rest of the flags, and there were a lot of I don't know if they were fans or just ball boys or whatever standing in front of a lot of the banners, so you couldn't even read what the banners said. I was actually disappointed because I thought it would be more militant. I thought it would be more not vocal, really, and visual from Dortmund fans in their protest about the
that's a good point, because I think maybe Lawless and Joy were anticipating that because it was Dortmund. So they spent most of the pregame talking about the I wouldn't say most of the pregame, but their most animated segments in the pregame, at least from Lawless, was about the protests. And he was on Twitter engaging with me, among others, about, hey, what do you think? You think this is going to stop the Bundesliga? Then you're right. It was less animated, maybe as vocal in the sense that there were 20-something thousand empty seats, which you never see at that crowd. But right. Less militant in the way they executed it than Eintracht fans had been the previous week. That's a good point.
Yeah, because I was watching it, and actually I said this about the Frankfurt game. It made me watch the game because I was watching the football, but also watching what would happen. And with the Dortmund game against Augsburg, to me it was a bit of a snoozer of a game. It was typical Dortmund this season. Very ineffective. I don't know, just they're not the same Dortmund that they used to be by any means, and Pulisic is having a bad season too. So it's it wasn't the greatest game either. But I wish that Alexi Lawless and Gian Joy had been there for the Frankfurt RB Leipzig game the week before, because that was the one that Christian Miles was just doing the voiceovers for, and he had no idea what was going on and was caught blindsided on that one. So at least they're addressing the issue now a week later.
Yeah, this week they were prepared, but you're right. They were caught flat-footed the week before, even though it had been well known this was going to happen or something was going to happen.
Right, exactly. And I'm sure with Christian Miles, it probably was just one of those things like, hey, you're scheduled to do this game. All you have to do is just the voiceover, before the game starts and at halftime and post-match. And it's an easy job. Come in half an hour before the game starts, you're all set. And probably didn't do the research to see what was actually going on in terms of all the planned protests that they were planning on doing.
Quite frankly, I should mention that the match was probably the worst match I've seen from Dortmund since Stoger took over. So not really anything entertaining or to write home about.
Right.
But we're not talking about the match anyway. We're talking about the protests. So I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Tuesday and Wednesday, watched the FA Cup games, the replays. Tuesday was not a very exciting game by any means. Swansea against Sheffield Wednesday, but Swansea did what they did. For me, Kartik, actually, it's interesting because I became a Swansea fan probably in 1977, and even back then, as a kid. Everyone was talking about the 1964 semi-final that Swansea had gone to and had lost in. And back then, it was always kind of folklore and just, people knew about it and they would talk about it. And here we are, 2018, and Swansea have now made it into the quarterfinals. Actually, semi-finals. Sorry. With Spurs. Quarterfinals, yeah. Thank you. And now have a chance to go ahead and actually make it back into the semi-finals if they can get past Spurs. So it would be the first time in since 1964 they have had a chance to get
Is it worth it? Do you want that backlog? Well,
okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think actually for me it's been better for Swansea because they've actually had a chance to try out some different formations, try out some different players, and get more match practice time. They haven't picked up. Well, actually, so I was going to say they haven't picked up any injuries. They have picked up injuries, but it was to two players that are replaceable. But for me, though, too, actually having the match practice, having those extra games has actually been more beneficial. And actually, for the most part, when Swansea's played midweek and played in the FA Cup, they've actually played better in the next game after that in the Premier League. So I'm okay with having these extra games. Of course, if they get relegated, then even if they get relegated, I think it's. I mean, for me, it's Swansea's had such a poor history with the FA Cup. To me, I'd rather stay up than than lose an FA Cup final or win an FA Cup final. But I'm okay with them progressing through as they are. Now, that's probably not the belief of a lot of people out there. But and then the Spurs Rochdale game, Kartik, I missed the first half, so I missed all the VAR controversy. I saw the second half, and so I watched the game. I love watching games when it's snowing and just seeing. I mean, it's just a great spectacle to watch on television. Now, if I was at the stadium or playing in a game, I'm sure I'd think it's a completely different story. I would probably hate it. But for me, I just love watching games when it's snowing, and it's been such a long time since I've seen one with such a heavy snowfall as this one. Did you get a chance to watch this one, Kartik?
Yeah, I only saw portions of it in the first half. I was in my office and saw Rochdale hit the post. It was interesting to see Spurs, at least in that first half, have so much trouble breaking Rochdale's press when they pressed high. And then there was also the VAR controversies, which, again, I'm just frustrated. I don't want to get into it. I've said my piece. We've given it a chance. I think it's a problem for the sport, and I know there are these people who say, well, you'll get, if you can change any call, if you get one more call correct than you would otherwise. Now, I don't agree with that. And in fact, there are people I talk to who say part of the beauty of football is the controversy and the talking points we get from the controversy. If you're only going to be able to correct a few calls and not all calls that are potentially incorrect, then what's the point?
Yeah, I think it's we're not ready. We're not ready by any means, and it's one of those things that I'm sure a lot of the people that were pushing for video technology probably couldn't envision what's happening right now, where it just seems that it's being overused, and even when it's being used, it's taking too long to make the decision, and oftentimes it's not the correct decision. So it's still in its early stages. I can see it at a point working and being more beneficial to the game, but whether it's the FA or the Premier League or all these different leagues are doing it differently. But FIFA or somebody needs to step in and say, okay, this is exactly the way that we're going to use it. We're going to only use it for these types of calls, and it might mean changing some of the rules a little bit, especially with the offside rule, rather than it coming down to millimeters. That there needs to be kind of a distance between the two players for him or her to be offside, or there's a lot of things that are going to change the way that football should be officiated if you have this technology in place, and we're not there yet. All right, Kartik, we have a new sponsor of the World Soccer Talk podcast that I'm excited to share with you, and that's a company called Away Days, which is a small and independent clothing brand based out of Boston. Away Days creates unique, beautifully designed soccer T-shirts. One of their most intriguing products is called Mystery Kits. For $25, you pick your jersey size and you receive a mystery one. All of these are official club jerseys from all over the world. They could be a few years old, but they are all 100% new and authentic. Away Days only features unique teams from different countries. So, for example, if you are an Arsenal fan, you wouldn't want a Tottenham jersey, but you probably wouldn't mind a Swedish club's jersey. Some customers have used this to get started following teams that they've never heard of, and it helps them learn about how the game is played in other smaller countries and leagues from around the world. It's a cheap way to get some more jerseys, and it's a way to get jerseys of teams you wouldn't normally be able to get from big websites or stores. And for World Soccer Talk podcast listeners, you get a special 15% discount on the entire site. Just go to awaydaysfootball.com and enter promo code WorldSoccer at checkout. Again, that's awaydaysfootball.com. Check them out. All right, Kartik, let's move on to TV streaming news.
Yeah, ESPN's coverage of the 2018 MLS season kicks off on Sunday, March 4th, with Seattle against LA Galaxy. From Seattle, Bank of California Stadium is almost ready, but the first 6 match days, it's not LA Galaxy, by the way, it's LAFC. So sorry for that. Against LAFC, LAFC will be playing their first 6 away matches away. That's on ESPN and ESPN Deportes at 5 p.m. Eastern. 28 of the 31 regular season matches will air on ESPN. The remaining 3 will be on ESPN FC, which is on ESPN2, which is a great commitment to the to the league to show most of the games on the primary channel. Exactly the same number as 2017, except that ESPN also has the All-Star game that rotates back and forth. As of the recording of this podcast on Thursday morning Eastern time, Fox and Univision still have not announced their TV plans for the 2018 season. Chris, I think it'll be a good ratings day. They promoted it so heavily, ESPN, and Seattle against LAFC, I think, will intrigue a lot of people because it's one, it's Seattle, who draws better on television anyway, and 2, it's the new club LAFC that everybody is excited about.
Yeah, I'm not sold on this, Kartik. I mean, I will definitely try to watch these games. I'm not going to go out of my way to watch them. So for me personally, I will. If I'm not doing anything, I'll watch the games, but I'm not going to rush out there and watch it. I'll give it a chance and see how it goes. The challenge for me, Kartik, and I don't know if it's the same for you, but the challenge for me is that I have no local MLS team, so there's very little reason for me to tune in and watch these games when there's no local relevance. So I'm sure it's the same for a lot of listeners too that don't have a local MLS team. And even if they do, there's probably the same challenge too, is that why should we watch this league if these matches relatively are meaningless until, July or August when the play.
Yeah, that's what, I mean, I'll tell you just from talking to people in Orlando, even though they do have an MLS team there, they don't think watching other games matters until August or September because there's no relevance to it, particularly if it's a Western Conference matchup. Why would they care?
Yeah, and I have nothing against Major League Soccer. I will watch these games if I've got nothing else going on Sunday. I'm just curious to see what the reaction is going to be to Major League Soccer this season, especially with the U.S. men's national team getting crashing out of the World Cup with mostly an MLS team managed by an MLS coach. I think there is going to be some backlash. I just don't know how much there will be, and I guess on Sunday we'll see with those TV ratings and see how those numbers come out, and I'm sure we'll talk about those on the next podcast. All right, Kartik, the FIFA World Cup has been removed off of Fox Soccer Match Pass. Now, last week there was a press release that went out to announce the streaming and TV schedule from Fox, which was that every single game was going to be streamed on Fox Soccer Match Pass. The bad news is that Fox Soccer Match Pass has now been removed from that. There's been no explanation yet from Fox Soccer Match Pass or Fox Sports why this decision was reached. What we do know is that the games will be on Fox Sports Go, which does require a cable or satellite subscription or another provider to authenticate your login. Also, some of the games will be on foxsports.com. The foxsports.com right now, we don't know whether it's going to be behind any type of authentication, any kind of paywall. Very little details, but what we do know is Fox Soccer Match Pass will not be showing these games. So there will be other options out there for cord cutters, including Sling TV, Fubo TV, DirecTV Now, and others.
According to The Guardian, it's understood that a Premier League winter break is a step closer to being agreed after the FA, the Premier League, and the Football League reached a provisional agreement to play the FA Cup fifth round in midweek from the 2019-2020 season. Accommodating a winter break would mean breaking the longstanding FA Cup tradition of weekend ties to allow all Premier League clubs and their players to have at least 13 days without a match during the beginning of February every year. Now, this break actually kind of already is there for teams that get eliminated from the FA Cup early. By the way, we're talking about fifth round. We're not talking about in the middle of December or late December. Just so people know, the FA has still yet to give final approval on the move. If so, it'll start with the 2019-2020 season, which is when the new television packages kick in.
Yeah, and there's also talks about possibly scrapping the FA Cup fifth round replays, and you mean if the game ends as a tie going into extra time and then penalty kicks. But we've talked about this one before, Kartik. My concern is that these clubs that will have a 2-week break will go ahead and use that time to go ahead and play friendlies overseas, probably in the United States, or the Middle East or Africa or wherever else. In theory, it's a good idea. I'd like to see what happens actually when this thing takes off, and if clubs are actually going to give their players a 2-week break.
I'm almost convinced they'll go and play friendly somewhere. So there are managers that historically have done that. David Moyes, if his teams are out of the FA Cup, has always taken his team to Dubai or to Spain, or Mark Hughes brought his team here to the United States once.
Yeah, Alex Ferguson's done it before too when they had breaks. Well, not breaks, but kind of, whether it's...
You get eliminated from the FA Cup early. Right. Yeah. So as of now, if you get eliminated from the FA Cup early, there is a bit of a break there already for not necessarily for Football League clubs, but for Premier League clubs.
Right. And that's the important thing to add to, Kartik, is that for this, if this winter break does go ahead, it's only for Premier League clubs. So it won't impact the Championship or League One or League Two in England. So those will continue to play on. It's just the Premier League. So I don't know. It's... I don't know. We have to wait and see what happens on this one. In theory, it's a good idea, but in practice, I don't think it's going to be. All right. So according to a new article in a magazine called DigiDay, Premier League executives will be looking very closely at the potential of Amazon acquiring the UK rights to the final 2 packages that are available for the 2019-20 season onwards in the UK. Reason being is that the Premier League are considering setting up their own streaming service. I know this is something that I haven't heard much about. So actually, it's interesting that we found this story. So the article does say that with Amazon as one of the league's broadcasters, or potentially, football chiefs can monitor from afar how fans watch games in Prime before deciding on how and where to show matches via its own channel. Said one executive with knowledge of the league's digital strategy. If it looks like its live streaming works in any way, then that's going to be a concern for TV broadcasters, said the executive. Which it is going to be a concern because most of the revenue that the Premier League gets is from television. And I'm sure this would be kind of an in-between if Amazon does pick up some of these rights in the streaming to see how that is received. See in terms of the number of signups, and also in terms of how illegal streaming is impacting that, and whether the Premier League could at some point in the future go ahead and then just have a direct-to-consumer package that would have all of the games available digitally for anyone around the world, and figuring out what the price point is for that, and figuring out whether they could generate more money that way than going through the TV side of things. But any thoughts on this one, Kartik? Do you think this could be this could work?
I suppose. I think you're making your bet now that Amazon is going to be a player, maybe for the main packages and maybe globally in the future. So it's just the foot in the door type thing, and testing out a new medium.
Yeah, and I think it is one of those things that I think they just have to kind of watch and see what happens, and then learn from that. And it could be that we're not ready for that yet in terms of, especially from the Premier League's point of view, with illegal streaming, if it is so rampant, now is not the time, or in the near future is not the time to go ahead and launch a product that could be cannibalized by illegal streaming. But it'll be one to keep an eye out for sure.
Moving on, Fox, Telemundo, and U.S. Soccer will be concerned this week after a report that the 2026 World Cup won't be a slam dunk, a win for the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. Morocco could be the favorite as things stand now. That was from Sam Borden in ESPN. The foreign press also have been particularly outraged at the TV bonuses promised by Fox and Telemundo to FIFA if the 2026 World Cup is awarded to the U.S., Mexico, Canada, to that group of 3 countries. The Daily Mail had an article on this that broke Sunday night. Sunday night UK time, Sunday afternoon US time, shortly after that League Cup final finished. And it's been a topic of a lot of conversation. Let me just interject something that I put on Twitter here, Chris. I think this is the most appropriate place. Those in the US who assume that Morocco is some fly-by-night thing, they have bid seriously for World Cups before and have perhaps, based on who you believe and what reports you believe, perhaps been denied World Cup hosting rights because of the corruption of the other bidders. So there is a sense, I think, among some people that they might be owed a World Cup after all this corruption was on. The lid has been blown off of FIFA corruption. But as I said, they've been close to hosting 2 or 3 times in the past. And then for those who say, well, South Africa just hosted, so it's going back to Africa. Well, no, but to compare sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa is it's a different world entirely. So
yeah, it seems
a Bible bit.
Yeah, it seems like a very FIFA thing to do, though, too, in terms of awarding this to Morocco. So for everyone that thought, I mean, for a long time, everyone's been saying like it's a slam dunk for the US to win this. It's just, all the stadiums, the transportation systems, and everything set up to go ahead and have this World Cup in 2026 launched immediately with, relatively little expense. I mean, then you look at all the other countries, whether it's Brazil or South Africa or Russia, and all the millions that those governments are spending to build and change the infrastructures and stadiums. With Morocco, I can easily see them winning it. And I'm not so concerned about these millions of dollars that have been promised by Fox and Telemundo to FIFA as bonuses if they do get the 2026 World Cup. As the foreign press is outraged by this, but I can see how it would sway FIFA's decision. And actually, if anything, it could come back to haunt US, Mexico, and Canada, where it actually could hurt them in the long run, especially when there's so much scrutiny on the awarding of the next World Cup, which is going to be announced on June 13th.
Look, I know people in soccer, because it fills the coffers and gives people jobs, want to host a World Cup. But we've seen the problems that are left by hosting these sorts of events. So long as the U.S. can qualify, and I think they'll qualify for a 48-team World Cup without much difficulty, I'm not sure that hosting is necessarily the best thing. Now, for Canada, it's critical, right? Canada's trying to establish the sport in that country and create a framework for a professional structure, an independent professional structure, independent of the U.S. infrastructure. I can understand their urgency around it. But I go back and forth on whether I want the U.S. to host or not, because I think that it ends up causing a lot of damage. You build stadiums, you lay a lot of infrastructure, you spend a lot of money from the public standpoint that I don't think our municipalities and our state governments can afford to spend at this point. This isn't the 1980s or 1990s anymore. The budget realities have changed in this country, but that's a conversation for another day.
Well, let me just dive in a little bit on this one, Kartik. In my lifetime, living in the United States, and I moved here in '84, and I've been here ever since, the biggest soccer spectacle, the biggest event that's ever happened, that's helped really the United States, the soccer in the United States, was the 1994 World Cup. And I really think that a 2026 World Cup in the US, Mexico, and Canada would be the next biggest thing for the next generation, or the next kind of chapter of soccer in the United States. It would really kind of help take things off. In '94, I think there were still a lot of people that were soccer haters or just didn't really watch the game or understand the game. We're at a level now where, for the most part, most mainstream people are aware of it. We'll probably tune in now and again during a World Cup if the US is playing. But for the most part, in terms of the level of soccer at this level, we wouldn't be at this level if we didn't have the '94 World Cup. So the 2026 World Cup is crucial to the growth of the game in this country. In terms of infrastructure and transportation and spending, those things, I think for the most part, especially in the United States, we're ready day one. Yes, there's going to be expenses involved with a major competition like this, but I don't think it would have the impact that it would have on other countries.
Yeah, that's probably true, but I would disagree. I don't want to see money siphoned out of public services to give tax breaks to build stadiums or build roads or whatever. So we'll see. This is to be continued. But yeah, I can't disagree with your assessment on what it would do for the sport. I just don't know if it's overall, taking the macro perspective as an American, in the public good to have this or the Olympics again. There's talk of the Olympics being in LA or Boston or someplace again. I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing for those communities anymore. But anyway, moving on.
All right. Well, several of the international deals for Major League Soccer TV rights are set to expire soon. And Kartik, you talked about this a few podcasts ago, where some of your sources were revealing that a lot of these rights deals were coming up for bidding. So I've learned that MLS is in the process of getting these renewed, and that one deal has closed, which is an increased amount from the same deal previously. So that's good news for Major League Soccer. And more details will be released in the next few weeks as more of these deals close around the world. So some positive news there. The challenge I've always had with Major League Soccer is that they've never really spoken much about the international rights or the international distribution, other than just mentioning that Major League Soccer is now available in, I don't know, over 100 countries. I'd like to find out more details about that. So we continue to kind of ask Major League Soccer to see if we can get an interview or learn more about this. So hopefully we will in the near future.
Yeah, so this next item is really interesting to me because ESPN and News Corp, 21st Century Fox have essentially ganged up on Comcast these last few years in the U.S. market. Now, Comcast has made a stunning $31 billion bid, estimated $31 billion bid for Sky, and moving into the British market potentially with a big bang. Maybe this confirms why, even though ostensibly Disney and Fox were rivals, that they teamed up and saw each other as kind of lesser evils than Comcast. This is pretty big news. Watch this space.
Yeah, 31 billion. I mean, that's just an incredible amount for Sky. That's just amazing. But so, yeah, we're in the middle of a bidding war there. Now, we finally got confirmation that the Eredivisie, the Dutch league, is back in the United States through a streaming platform called Oz.com. And we've discussed this in previous episodes, I think in Listener Mailbag, where we weren't sure whether or not it was legal or not. Well, we've found out that it is actually a legal site. It's based in Iceland. And in addition to the Eredivisie select games that they have, they also are streaming the A-League from Australia. So if you're in the US and you like Dutch football and Australian football, there is now an outlet via Oz.com.
UEFA has announced big changes for the 2018-19 Champions League season. For TV viewers, the biggest changes are staggered start times in the group stage. So instead of all the Champions League kickoffs being at 2:45 Eastern Time, 7:45 British Standard Time, they'll kick off at 12:55 p.m. Eastern and 3 p.m. Eastern, which allows multiple windows for True TV in the U.S., who will be the carrier of most of those games. Also, the top four teams in England, Germany, Spain, and Italy will avoid qualifying and will go directly to the group stage of the competition. That had been previously reported. That has now been confirmed.
Yeah, it'll be interesting though too, Kartik. I mean, like in a Fox world, I could imagine this doing really well if Fox still had the Champions League rights next season, where you'd have 2 games back to back on FS1 and then 2 games back to back on FS2, as well as, I mean, for the group stage, maybe Fox Soccer Plus and then sub-licensed to ESPN. But the reality is that Turner Sports is going to have these rights for next season, and from what we initially learned is that. Turner Sports, probably through whether it's TNT or True TV, would have one game a day on television, and the rest would be streamed. So we'll have to wait and see what Turner announces, more details about this and how many of the games will be on television and how many will be streamed. But this is an ideal television distribution of the Champions League, and having it setting up this way, mostly streaming, is not going to be as pleasurable for a soccer fan. I want to watch back-to-back games on television, but is one of the games going to be on television, but then the next is going to be on streaming, or vice versa? we'll have to wait and see what happens with that with Turner. I'm sure we'll hear more as we get closer to the end of the season and Turner announces more details. Now, Fanatis is a new streaming service and available in the United States, and they've announced that they've acquired the U.S. streaming rights to Copa Libertadores and Copa Sudamericana games. They're the only streaming provider that has access to all of the live games, and Fox Soccer Match Pass has rights to most of those games, but there's 40 games specifically that Fanatis has the rights to that Fox Soccer Match Pass does not. So if you want to have access to all of the games, Copa Libertadores and Copa Sudamericana, Fanatis is the way to go.
This week, Sports TV Ratings, which does this every month, lists the number of subscribers for each cable channel. It had some alarming news regarding Fox Sports 2, which is that they lost 500,000 subscribers in the first quarter of 2018. Now, if you remember, they had the biggest jump in the final quarter of 2017 because they got picked up by some additional cable systems. FS2 is now at 58.5 million subscribers, which is a number which is far less than what Fox would like it to be in, and far less than FS1.
At a technology conference this week in Spain, La Liga discussed how many advances they've made in improving the technology used at La Liga games. For example, La Liga last year installed something called True View multi-view cameras, which allow for TV replays to be viewed from any position or angle at Barcelona and Real Madrid stadiums. Now, for any of the listeners that have watched La Liga, whether it's last season or this season, for many of the big games is that during the match, I mean, just usually within seconds or a minute, you're getting these really interesting 3D angles or replays showing, say, whether it's Messi or Ronaldo or whoever, maybe how they see things. Or sometimes from the referee's point of view, what does the referee see? Is his view blocked? And it's a 360 view. So this technology, I mean, La Liga is definitely advancing with this, more so than the Premier League in many ways. So if you've been watching this, La Liga's continued to push the envelope to improve the technology, which is improving the television experience too. So hats off to them.
A recent study found that the average monthly household spend on streaming video services rose about 5% in 2017 to $9.46 per household, and that the average household is paying for 1.39 streaming services. This includes people who aren't cord cutters. I'm not a cord cutter, and I have, I think I subscribe to 4 or 5 streaming services.
Yeah, it's funny too, Kartik, because like these stats or this study shows $9.45 average spend for streaming services. To me, it sounds like the Netflix effect. Is that the average number of streaming services 1.39, so it's Netflix and some other service. But and like as we talked about last week's episode, I think Sling TV is over 2 million subscribers. I think PlayStation View's under 600,000 subscribers, and DirecTV Now is over 1 million. So some big numbers for some of these larger streaming providers, but still a ways to go. All right, Kartik, so there's a lot of news there we went through, but let's move on to TV ratings. And some big numbers out this week. The biggest number, well, it wasn't the biggest number, but the one that was to me at least, the most surprising number was the viewing number for the League Cup final, which was really not promoted at all by ESPN, but that one had 789,000 viewers that watched this game on ESPN and ESPN Deportes combined.
Yeah, it was actually, to me, a little bit of a stunning number, given that there was no promotion, there was no build-up for the tournament. They were busy promoting MLS all week, and this number was posted. Now, will this number be higher than the MLS opening day on ESPN? And I'm not sure it will be. I think the LAFC Seattle game has the prospect for a big number, which will then probably drop off in week 2 for MLS. But it's a strong statement about maybe the viability of the League Cup. Now, the problem is the League Cup, Chris, is a weekday property, right? Mm-hmm. So the only time you can get this kind of number from a League Cup match is on the weekends, which is going back to one of our news items before, part of, I think, the hesitation of moving an FA Cup match day to a weekday to provide for after winter break is because that's a weekend cup. The League Cup was a cup introduced once floodlights became common in English stadiums in the 1960s, and you could have midweek matches. So I don't know if it means they'll automatically put the final on television from here on out, but not put the rest of the competition on. If it means increased commitment, does it mean ESPN might bid for more rights? Maybe it gets them interested in the FA Cup. We talked about that last week. Because that is a weekend competition that would actually fit their model a little more, probably a little better. So and get them better numbers. A lot of questions to come out of this, all potentially positive questions, but worth asking.
Yeah, according to one of my sources, ESPN is definitely interested in the FA Cup and Serie A. And we talked a little bit. We actually teased it in last week's episode, but we had an article on the homepage, which is still there at worldsoccertalk.com, that talks about that the FA Cup rights and the Serie A rights might go to streaming only starting next season instead of television, or maybe a combination of the two. The thing is, though, too, Kartik, is that for the League Cup, it's very possible that this is going to be part of the ESPN Plus package for next season. So it's going to be streaming, and again, maybe it's the final that'll be on television. But if I'm a bean counter at ESPN and I look at the numbers and go, okay, how much did we pay for the rights to the League Cup, which I'm sure wasn't that much. Now, how much are we paying for Major League Soccer, and how much advertising and promos and all the energy expenditures we're putting on promoting Major League Soccer? And okay, we didn't promote this League Cup at all, and the League Cup final at all, and look at the viewing numbers, and looking what we can go back to our advertisers and say, hey, this is you mean the number of views that this game watched, and that the people saw your ads. To me, I'm looking at this thinking, okay, well, yeah, the League Cup's probably an undervalued property in many ways. And so hats off to ESPN for acquiring the rights to the League Cup and to the Championship. And I can see the Championship, too, not getting numbers like this by any means, but is under-promoted, undervalued league. And as we get into the playoff stages in the Championship at the end of the season, hopefully some of these games will be on ESPN2, or maybe the final on Championship final on ESPN. That'd be incredible. Some of the other numbers, Kartik, from this past week, we had 904,000 people watch the Watford-Everton game on NBC. The Man United against Chelsea game, which was a 9:05 Eastern Time kickoff on Sunday, had 689,000 viewers. And that's about it. We'll have all of the numbers at worldsoccertalk.com in the coming days. Now, moving on to Listener Mailbag, we've just got one message this week, and this is from Matt Haas. And he sent us a tweet. He says that just letting you guys know that Spectrum has just moved both the English and Spanish language beIN Sports and Espanol channels to a Latino package. It used to be on the Triple Play Silver package. Customers were not informed of the change. Channels simply disappeared. He had a call to find out, and he says the Spectrum website still has beIN listed in the Triple Play package.
Oh boy, that's not good. And this is the sort of thing we're used to seeing happen to us. This is what happened to Gold TV on a lot of systems even before beIN appeared, was that they were moved from a triple play type sports package. Triple play is what Spectrum brands it as, to a Latino package. And then you end up having to pay for an additional tier of channels just to get your soccer matches. And this also, I have to say, encourages cord cutting among soccer fans. Not good news. So thank you for that, Matt, for letting us know about that.
Yeah, the challenge is for beIN Sports is that the viewing numbers on beIN Sports and Espanol are huge compared to the beIN Sports English channel. So the English channel, not as many viewers. I mean, by any means, even for the Barcelona Real Madrid games, a lot of those games will get, say, about 100,000 viewers on beIN Sports, the English channel, and we'll get 300 to 400,000 on the Spanish channel. So from Spectrum's point of view, I can see it looking at this and going, okay, well, this is really more of a Latino package. This move it to the Latino package. So I can see where they're coming from, but ultimately it hurts beIN Sports. And that's why over the last 2 years, we've seen beIN Sports make a big move into covering college football, motocross, tennis, all these other sports to try to make it more and try to see if they can increase the distribution by showing it, pushing it as not just a soccer package or soccer streaming network, but as a sports network.
That makes a lot of sense. That may explain why you've seen these pushes into other sports, and unfortunately, it really hasn't worked for them. We'll see what the future of beIN Sport in English is in the U.S. market in the next few years. I think there are a lot of questions there, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. So if you have any questions for us or any feedback or anything you disagree with us about or agree with us about, send us an email at web@worldsoccertalk.com. You can tweet us at worldsoccertalk, or you can message us on Facebook at facebook.com/worldsoccertalk. Now, Kartik, where can listeners find you on the internet if you want to catch up on your latest rantings and ravings about our soccer hashtag and other things?
Yeah, KKFLA737 is the best place to find me, and obviously on the web at worldsoccertalk.com. Also, sportbusiness.com is a new place I'm working as well. And
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you for that, and that's now my day job, as well as pumping out articles for them. There's a lot of analysis and a consultancy side of that, Chris. So it's not just what you see on the Sport Business website, but there's a lot of consultancy services associated with it.
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you for listening. You can get a new episode of the World Soccer Talk podcast every Thursday. Every episode is released on SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, Audio Boom, and worldsoccertalk.com. If you like the show, share it with your friends on social media and give us a review. And Kartik, what should they do this weekend?
Enjoy your football.